What's up, Warriors, and welcome to another episode of the Mental Health Movement Podcast, Voice for the Voiceless. I am your host, Chris. Thank you guys so much for these last couple weeks and being patient with me on these recordings. Been scrambling around getting guests and just trying to make sure I have everything set before August. As I mentioned before, I will be away a good majority of August between my birthday vacation and being on a cruise outside of the country. So I won't really be near my phone. Um, so thank you guys so much for tuning in. Thank you for the continuous support, and thank you to all the guests who have come on. Speaking of guests, today we have a very special guest who came to me a couple weeks ago. He is a co-founder, president, and CSO of a company called Supermind. He has 30 plus years in data analysis and executive coaching. Please help me welcome Geoffrey Cole. Geoff, how's it going, man?
I'm fantastic. How are you today?
I'm doing good, man. Thank you so much for taking the time today and coming on.
Truly my pleasure. Thank you for including me in your podcast.
Yeah, man.
But
And before we recorded, like I said, nice hat. I love the representing.
yeah, I like the brand.
Yeah, so let's talk about Supermind. What did the journey look like into creating that company, and what is the main goal of Supermind?
So I suffered from 7 years of depression, self-esteem issues. I had addiction issues. I had anxiety attacks, panic attacks, sleep. I mean, it was just I had a whole, nightmare going on, and I couldn't get the help. I tried lots of different things, and just the best I could get was to be able to cope, and I learned how to cope really, really well. And if you go to my website at supermind.us, I do have a little bit of my story there, and I recount how I planned my suicide and why I didn't kill myself. And it was rough. It was really, really bad. I learned how to, on a daily basis, become somewhat satisfied, somewhat happy. And then I would go to sleep and I would wake up suicidal, wake up depressed. And obviously, I had a sleep issue. And I did all the sleep studies, and, physiologically, my sleep was fine. No one really tracks the mental side of sleep. And that's something we do now and help people improve upon. And so my journey started back in the early 2000s, and I began counseling. And then in 2007 I found the neurofeedback and found the neuroscience, and I dove in and found an inventor of a system and went and studied with him and really took on the neuroscience, and I brought it back into the practice that I was working in. I was working as a counselor for a psychologist, and doing executive coaching and helping families deal with addiction, because addiction is a family disease.
Right.
It affects everybody in the family. And so 2007, I started incorporating psychological therapy with neurofeedback, and I realized that both industries have a method of collecting information that's entirely subjective.
Right.
And I've been a data scientist since way back, and I'm like, well, you can't collect data from subjective sources and then study it to improve your process. And so I quickly, by 2009, had created a standardized process. What I realized is that when I have the brain computer interface and I'm watching your neural function, if I tell you to think about rats, pretty much I can get the same pattern. And so what you think about activates the neurons that the computer sees. And so I created a standardized process, and then now I have an objective measurement of how people are thinking, feeling, and functioning.
Right.
I've identified its augmented neuroplasticity, and I've identified different psychological states of being based on the neurological patterns that I see in the EEG. So when we do therapy at the office, we are doing continual EEGs and tracking everything objectively, as well as augmenting every person's neuroplasticity to speed up the process to be 100 times faster than we can do on our own.
Right. Um,
And Yeah, it's just been an amazing process for me. I healed my issues, and I've now helped thousands of people.
That's
It's,
incredible.
it's been a spectacular journey. I feel so blessed. It's
Yeah, it
so
must be
privileged.
gratifying being able to help that many people.
It's amazing. You know,
Yeah,
my kids got sick and tired of, you know, we would go out and people would stop and thank me for saving their lives and tell my kids, you know, your dad saved my life. And
right.
it's been an amazing journey. And so a couple years back, so I started.
I think your mic is cutting out. Let's see if I can pause this. All right, guys. Sorry about the technical difficulties we had. So go ahead and continue, Geoff.
So the first company was called the Brain Training Centers of Florida, which is a horrible name for a company. It was really where I was figuring things out from 2007 or 8 until 2016. Then I called it Pathways because we were providing the path to better brainwaves.
Right.
And then in 2017, a guy came in. His name was Chad Olin, and he was really having a hard time. He's an entrepreneur from Harvard Business School, and was just having all sorts of stress, anxiety. He had started a company, and as an entrepreneur and a startup, was going through the typical, very stressful, responses. And I helped turn everything around for him, and he was amazed. And he went back and was working, and then in 2019 hit a bunch more traumas that were very different, and he wasn't really equipped for that. And he came back to me, and again had a life-changing experience with me. And he said, hey, you know, we got to bring this to the world, because I was just really enjoying myself. I'm like, I'm fine. I don't really need to do anything. I'm
Right.
just going to keep doing what I'm doing. I'm helping people. I'm having a great time. And he says, no, this is too important. We got to figure out how to democratize access to this and build a wearable and put it with an app and distribute it through doctors and bring this to the world.
Hmm.
And so that's when we started Supermind back in 2001, and really launched in 2022. And we've been developing the product ever since. And then this year in May, I published my first book.
Nice.
Yeah, which is called How to Live Anxiety Free. So, and I could
Have you
drop.
gotten a lot of people to purchase that book?
I became an Amazon bestseller. Yes.
Nice.
Yeah, I
Nice.
was very happy about that. I'm gonna drop the link into the chat. So
Perfect.
that's so the people, you can put it up for people to buy the book.
Yeah.
It is the title says, it is a guide to helping people really live without anxiety in their
Yeah.
lives, and it's just so important.
Yeah, I agree. So let's take a just a quick step back towards the beginning of when your journey started and everything, right? You had mentioned addiction. So I've always been kind of curious because I haven't really had too many people to ask this question. Do you think addiction is a disease or a choice?
Definitely a disease, no doubt about it.
Okay.
I map I map brains.
Right.
I see biological markers
Hmm.
of an addict brain
Right.
from the nervous system. So it's either a disease or a condition, and it can be corrected. The beauty of neuroplasticity, which is just a fancy word that means our nervous system is constantly changing
Yeah.
and becoming an understanding that we can be in charge of that instead
Yeah.
of just letting it do what it wants. So we don't have to be a victim to the disease.
Right.
And that's, been one of my greatest discoveries. I've helped, really hundreds, maybe even more addicts be able to live addiction free. And that's all
Right.
sorts. I help
Mhm.
eating disorders. I help shopping, porn, addiction, gambling. I've helped so many different that are not, that are kind of borderline, whether they're addictions or not.
Right.
Yeah. And so it's been amazing for me.
Yeah, like I've heard the argument on both sides of, choice versus disease, and I've attended AA meetings with my mom when I was younger because she was going to those. And the whole discussion of choice be like, yeah, you can choose to get clean, you can choose to stay on that corrected path. So I guess that's kind of where or why I was asking a question, because I've always, obviously never been to the point in my life where I've been an addict, but it's that question comes up so often in today's world that it's interesting to hear it from like a basically a science perspective, because you see how the brain reacts to all these things. And I think so many people take that out of account when it comes to that, and they just look at it for a face value argument, like, oh, disease versus choice. Um, so how do you go about breaking those addictions? Like how does that process work?
So in my office is one way. The other way is through recovery,
Mm,
12-step programs.
right,
We also do direct counseling. And the easiest, best way to get off of any addiction is to replace it with a healthy one.
right.
Once you do that, and every time you feel that urge and compulsion, I mean, it's happening from the unconscious. So when I said I see it neurologically, it's happening as an involuntary compulsion.
Right.
And often addicts are doing the behavior before they realize they're doing the behavior. So
Mm,
that idea that you can make a choice is accurate. However, I believe that that choice has to be made prior to the compulsion. So
makes sense.
in the minute that your body or a person's body is taking over from the unconscious, I think it's too late.
Yeah.
And so that's why going to a meeting a day, calling a sponsor, following the 12-step outlines for all the different, programs there are, has been so effective, because they aren't just saying, hey, wait till you have the compulsion and then try to do something and make a choice
Right.
then. Because at that moment, there is no choice.
Yeah.
A person does not know that they can get out of it.
Right.
And it's just, and it all goes back to neuroplasticity, right? When you start to build a practice or a behavior that's different than what always drove you to the addiction, then your body doesn't start to create that unconscious involuntary compulsion.
Right.
So it's kind of a combination of a choice and a disease,
Yeah.
which is good reason for it to be confusing, right? Because
Yeah, exactly.
well, if you make the choice, why don't you just choose not to use? And
Yeah.
it's just not that simple. I wish it were. Uh,
So I have a question about the meetings and the 12 steps. I know you had mentioned that you feel it's very effective. Do you feel that it could also be tempting for, people that are starting their getting clean journey? Because you're hearing so many different stories about how people were using, and fresh people that are coming into those meetings are hearing those stories and giving them, I guess, essentially new ideas. Do you think that temptation would be there too? Like, because I watched my mom go through the 12-step program, and she made progress for maybe 6 months and then just kind of relapse, which I know is, that's part of the process. It happens, right? But I just kind of feel like you meet so many like-minded people, and that temptation could be thrown in there too. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't, like I said, I'm not an addict myself, so I don't really know that environment fully to understand it.
well, life is life,
Right.
right? So no matter what you do, where you go, if you have addictive tendencies or
Mhm.
behaviors that are coming out of your unconscious, everything you do, everybody you talk to can trigger, like you said,
Yep.
tempt you to go out and use. The great thing in most meetings, not every meeting, these are not organized.
Yeah.
This is a very unorganized organization. And so there's no standard for the meetings. However, in most meetings, people who are talking about their using behavior and their stories, about it typically move into how much better their life is. And one of the great things, and they say it in the Narcotics Anonymous literature, is that the person that can help an addict the most is someone who they can relate to. So when they talk about the using stories, for most people, it's to build that relational bond, to be able to know, oh, this person knows what I've been through, where I am, what I'm talking about. And typically they lead into the recovery process, how much better it is, and guidance on how to not use.
Right.
That doesn't happen every meeting.
Yeah.
So, sometimes, yeah, it could happen. I've
Yeah. And
seen, yeah, I've been to, I've been to meetings where I've seen that kind of a story come out. And, the recovery side isn't spoken about. And you're like, oh
yeah.
my gosh. Yeah. So that, yeah, it's possible. Life is life. People are people. This is an unorganized
Yeah.
organization.
I
So.
think that's probably the best way to describe it as an unorganized organization.
Well, and
um,
they're kind of that way on purpose.
okay.
I mean, just imagine having an organization run by addicts and alcoholics. I mean, it's a nightmare. So we better have it be
Fair enough.
let's just make it unorganized.
That's completely fair. So let's talk about the book a little bit. So did you incorporate any of your personal experiences in there, or is it kind of like a step-by-step process on how, to live anxiety free, as your book title says?
So it's both.
Okay.
I kind of followed that 12-step model, right? I started out with my story and talk about, what I went through in my life and how confused I was, and then my journey to being able to help others,
Right.
to get to a place of peace and comfort and happiness. I suffered from depression and it was debilitating. So when I got through that and started to help others, then I realized I had something to share. And that's why I wrote the book.
Yeah.
And so I moved from my story into how to live anxiety free.
I love that. So this kind of brings me to the question of, us being men and speaking out and telling our story. Why do you feel most men struggle to even express that they need help?
It's not the common process of men to be vulnerable, to say I'm vulnerable, to say I have flaws, to say I have chinks in my armor. We want it's natural, it's in the Homo sapien human process for men to, rise to the alpha level of any group, tribe, situation.
Sure.
So it's hard for us as men to show up and be purposely saying I'm less than. And it's a difficult process. I do cover that in the book because I
Yeah.
think that whole dynamic of I gotta have status,
Yeah.
it is anxiety causing.
Right.
We train our unconscious by having that mentality that we got to pay attention to what everybody's doing and make sure whatever they do that I position myself properly. And geez, I used to do that nonstop. And, I would do things to try to position myself as better than, and,
Right.
half the time it would backfire. I'd be like, oh my gosh, why did I say that? What a nightmare.
Yeah.
And a big part of what the book helps people do is understand how to be, who am I?
Yeah.
And even better, if I don't like who I am, who do I want to be?
Mhm.
And then I lay out a process in the book to develop that. And that process is pretty simple. I followed the Harvard study, which is the most expensive and longest lasting study. It's been going on for 80 years where they tracked the graduates and every year surveyed them until I guess until their death,
Yeah. Yeah.
and asked them, all right, what's the most important thing in life? Give it to us. And it's been relationships.
Yeah.
And relationships start with a relationship with ourselves.
Absolutely.
I think we should have learned that in first grade.
I 100% agree.
You know, why have they kept this a secret? Why do we have to wait for the 80-year study from Harvard? You know,
All
like,
those
come
damn
on.
coloring books.
Exactly. They could have put some of that in there, right?
Right, right.
Actually, it is kind of hidden. There's a lot of pretty good messages in the comic books, and
You're right. You're right. 100% right.
and one of the ones
Always
that
matters.
one of the
Yeah.
ones I've struggled with is the Spider-Man message.
Right.
That where the Godfather grandfather says to Spider-Man, with great ability becomes great responsibility.
Right.
It's always bothered me. I've
Yeah.
always tried to avoid responsibility. It's such an ugly thing, and yeah, and now I've moved into, which is one of the reasons why I wrote the book, is
Right.
that with what I've learned, I have a responsibility to share. And so I've kind of changed the word from responsibility to response
Mm.
ability. And
Mm.
so I have the ability to respond. And
That's a
it's
good
just,
one.
yeah, I actually learned it in a therapeutic ketamine journey I went through, and
Nice.
it came out in the middle of that, and I've been using it ever since. So it's powerful.
So you had said something in there that I wanted to ask, kind of like piggyback off of it. Men wanting to be the alpha male, wanting to be the top of the food chain, and wanting to be that protector, that provider. Do you think you can also be alpha, but also be vulnerable? Is that a possibility? Like, from my standpoint, uh, I said this to my therapist. Society expects men to be the protector, the provider of the family and everything. That's just how it's almost always been, right? But I also feel like you can be the protector of yourself too, and protect yourself from all the things, all the external noise and all the BS that's there to hurt you. So do you feel like you can, I guess, bridge that gap between being an alpha and vulnerability?
Well, it's a great question, Chris. It's a constant line that we end up walking.
Yeah.
And as I wrote in my book, and the
Hmm.
process that I give out, which is, let's identify all the values that are rewarding for us to live by. And so, I actually provide a list, and I mean, you can find lists anywhere. For me, one of my highest values is integrity
Right.
and precision. And so if I say I'm going to do something, I feel fantastic when I show up and I do that.
Yeah.
And I used to kind of take that for granted. And so a big part of what the book talks about is, let's lay it out. I mean, come on, we're men. We can create a formula. Let's create a ledger and keep track. And so a lot of people call it journaling, which sounds kind of vulnerable and not manly. So
Right, right.
let's call it a ledger, anything we can. And so and then the other part of that is from the Harvard study, is the roles that, again, like, I love being a father. I love being a husband according to my standards, not according to their standards, because we want to be true to ourselves.
Right.
And once we're true to ourselves and can fully accept who we are, then we also know what our flaws are. And as humans, everybody has flaws.
Absolutely.
And so it's important for me, as part of one of my values, is to fully live as a perfect human, which is a flawed person.
Right.
So when you're a flawed person who's tracking your values and your roles, living in accordance with those, as I outlined in the book, then however you show up, you show up. And this drive to be alpha male becomes a want instead of a need.
Mm,
Right? And a need, our unconscious causes involuntary actions
makes sense.
for survival fear-based reasons.
Right.
And so we are, as humans, fear-based pack animals. The car packs tribes. And as that alpha male is the tribal mechanism that's
Mhm.
natural for us. And so just like we were talking about recovery and addiction, if I get up every day and I work in the morning, and that's one of the things I talk about is let's create a morning mental fitness routine where I'm transcending my animal instincts and moving into being very true to myself so that I can enter into my tribes that I want to. This tribal mechanism, which is natural for humans, 200,000 years ago, if we were wandering around the Serengeti, we were dead. We were food. We've become animal poop.
Right.
And so now, how many tribes are you a member of? You're a member of like 15 tribes. Well, your system can't keep track of who you're supposed to be.
Right.
So all of us are walking around confused, trying to be this alpha male, which is the natural instinct. And so really what I teach is let's stop worrying about being the alpha male. Now, for me, what's happened is I have a lot of tribes. I love my tribes. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying tribes are bad. We just don't want them to be part of our survival. They're part of our wants, likes, and desires. So it's not a need anymore. And so if I can position myself before I'm going into any situation that I know who I am and I'm going to show up as me, and the tribe will take care of itself. I don't have to worry about that.
Right.
Some tribes I rise to alpha male. Some tribes I don't. And it really doesn't matter. I enjoy wherever I am, whatever tribe I'm in, because that's my choice.
Right.
And that's where that choice thing comes on. Right. It's almost the same as the addiction thing. If I prepare myself well, then I can make a choice.
So
If
all
I
in all, it basically boils down to the relationship we have within ourselves and how you deal with every situation that you walk into.
Yes. And one of the things I also talk about in the book is the mirror conversation.
Yeah.
I teach people, hey, every morning, let's have a conversation in the mirror where you're giving yourself the pep talk. The least I ever do is I look in the mirror and I say, I love you. You are awesome. And I do that every day.
Yeah.
Because if I don't have love for myself, how am I going to love anybody else? And why
Yeah.
would you love me if I don't love me?
Yeah.
I'm kind of giving you a reason not to love me.
Right.
And so, I have a lot of people I tell that to, and they're like, that just sounds so weird.
It
Like,
does. And it's funny when you have those conversations with people and you tell them like, hey, those daily affirmations are so powerful and you don't realize it until you start doing it. And I feel like as a society, we've become so accustomed to saying, I can't do this or I'm not able to do this. You're not able to do those things because you're telling yourself that you can't do it. If you start telling yourself you can, eventually you're going to start doing it and be like, oh, wow, this is really easy. Now, obviously, I'm not telling you that you can be a brain surgeon because you're saying you can, but you limit yourself. And I feel like so many of us limit our own potential and we don't realize it because, that whole comparison conversation is such a big red sore thumb in this community is comparing. And I grew up with a mom who always had to compare her situation to everybody. So that was implanted in my brain. Then I started going to therapy and I broke that habit. Um, it happens sometimes where I'll compare like, damn, I'm not where I want to be in life, and my best friend is, 10 steps ahead of me, and I feel like I'm stuck. But then I remind myself, you're catching up because of your parents put you behind, but also holding yourself accountable to the things that you can control. You can't change your past, but you can mold your future to make sure you don't repeat everything that your parents and what you did in your past.
that's right on, man. I really appreciate you saying that. That is, exactly what I've been talking about, and I'm really glad that you're on that journey too. It's nice to see fellow men that are taking it on, and a lot of the people in the past, that movie, The Gladiator, talks about it a lot, where the hardest uh thing to enemy to conquer is the enemy within.
Absolutely. And it all
And
starts with that mirror conversation, man. It really does.
well, and what you just said, though, the limiting belief. right? Those, what you just said there was just, I mean, it's such a key linchpin where, anytime I'm speaking to people and I hear these limiting beliefs, like you said, that's holding them back, and then we have to kind of move into that conversation. Hey, let's talk about limiting beliefs
Yeah.
and how they're ruining your life, so I like to shift all that to anything's possible. It's
Yeah.
fun. It's funny
Absolutely.
you brought up the metaphor of a brain surgeon, because I was told back in 2008 when I went to a psychologist and said, "Hey, I'm mapping the mind." And he said, "You can't do that. It's impossible
Right.
because the mind isn't a thing, it's a concept."
Right.
I'm like, "What are you talking about? I'm mapping it right here. Look at this, And limiting beliefs, it could have stopped me in my tracks right there,
And
you know.
it's interesting with the psychologist conversation too, because you meet so many, I'm sure you meet hundreds, within your journey of doing what you've done. And you see how differently everybody approaches their field of study. And there's people that are just, I'm here to make money. Then there's people that are actually trying to help people. And then you include the science that goes into helping people, like what you're doing. And I always feel like there's so many therapists out there that are just so brilliant that don't get the acknowledgement that they deserve. And then there's that crop field of, I don't want to say bad therapists, but therapists that just weren't taught the best techniques to help people, to broaden their horizons on how they help people. Now it's just, oh, what can I prescribe you today, instead of, how can I help you get better? And for me, growing up, I was so against therapy because I just never wanted to talk about anything that I was going through. And it was also, my mom was saying, you need to go to therapy. And, my mom being a narcissistic person, I always felt like there was an extra in something in it for her if I went to therapy. So I never did. Um, it took my second attempt to start going to therapy. And I was about 27 and I started going to therapy. And the first two sessions, I couldn't get a word out without crying. And
Hmm.
I'm not a big crier. I wasn't a big crier. And that was 27 years of bottling down emotions
Hmm.
and feelings. And, again, going back to the alpha male and, just putting on a tough front for people, and people don't realize how impactful those conversations can be when you start having them with people, especially as guys. Like, we all joke around that we can hang out with the guys and nothing will be wrong, but that's therapy for us. Hanging out with the boys is therapy. But when you actually start doing therapy, it's a completely different level of peace and love for yourself.
Well, you're really that's a big big can you've just opened up. The world of therapy, like I said a little while ago, it lacks a good base science. And so
Yeah.
it's kind of the traditional understandings are unfortunately deeply embedded in that industry of psychology. You pointed out a very interesting point. The statistics show that on average, it takes three different therapists to find the one
Yep.
that can relate well with you, that you can relate with. And you got lucky at two, I guess.
No, three actually.
Oh, all right. Well, there you
Yeah.
go. That's the average.
Yeah.
And that's one of the benefits of the brainwave therapy that we do, is that I got an objective measure of what's happening. And I'm teaching. We do psychological education as well as mindfulness training, so that you become your own therapist very, very quickly. And so, unfortunately, what you were saying though is that there's so many psychologists out there that are so stuck in the history and the old school method of therapy. I just had a lead psychologist, and it's so sad from Israel come, and he's been guiding the armed forces on how to treat PTSD. And in his understanding and the less what they know is the best they can do is calm the PTSD reactions,
Yeah.
to calm the symptoms, and they're happy with 40 or 50% reductions in symptoms.
Yeah.
And my process, I help the person get rid of the patterns and replace them with new patterns in their nervous system, so the involuntary response changes entirely, and they don't have to cope with anything ever again.
Right.
And they just couldn't get to a place of understanding that because of, like you just said, some psychologists are just so stuck in the traditional methods, even though they don't work. They're still holding on to that framework like it's the only way to go.
Yeah.
And thank God there's a lot of therapists like the one you found that was able to, say, hey, why don't we talk about you? And
Yeah.
let's not talk about all that theory stuff. One of my
Right.
psychologists I went to started talking to me about Freud and loving my mother, and I was just like, dude, you have no idea what's going on with me.
Right. Right.
Although I love Freud because he was pretty much a cocaine addict, and I relate with addicts. He called cocaine the magic drug. I love that. He did have some good stuff, but
Yeah.
you got to weed through all some of the crazy stuff.
Right.
Yeah. So I mean, what you're saying is amazing, and it's also a really good reason for us men to like, why am I talking to these people?
Yeah.
Especially like if you stop it too. Right. Imagine if he would stopped it too. He
Yeah.
wouldn't have gotten all the help he'd got.
Right.
You
And the
know?
second one made me almost completely give up too. That's the bad part. So
Yeah,
like
it's
just as like a really quick like
please.
backstory about the therapy thing was, so after my second attempt, like I mentioned, I found my first therapist and spent 6 months with her, and I had to leave New Jersey because I couldn't be around my mom. I straight up told my therapist, I said, if I stay here, I will take my life. And that wasn't
Oof.
just like an intention thing. It wasn't me crying for help. It was being honest. I said, I genuinely feel like I will take my life if I stay here.
Wow.
So came back down to Florida, lived with my dad for maybe about a year before I found my own place. And when I started working at the job that I'm at now, I got medical insurance and went to my first therapist down here. First session, she didn't even look at me. She didn't write anything down. It was just me venting, talking to a brick wall, basically. She hands me a nutrition list, and that's it. Like, okay, so nothing came that session. So we rescheduled second session, and she asked me, she's like, "Would you take medicine?" And I looked at her, and I'm like, "I don't want to take medicine. Like, no, I don't feel like I'm chemically imbalanced here. Like I don't want medicine." And she's like, "Well, let me put it to you this way. If you had high blood pressure, would you take medicine?" And
Mm.
I said, "Well, of course, it's for your health." And then she just kind of gave me that look like, "Oh, well, this is for your health." And I had my very first anxiety attack. She cut me off mid-sentence when I was venting about what was going
Oh,
on.
wow.
And she's like, "We ran out of time today."
Oh,
So, oh, it gets even better. It gets
yeah.
even better. So after that, she sends me a text message and says that um, we can no longer book sessions. That she was booked up for whatever, and then she gave me a website to find another therapist, and I almost gave completely up. I was
Ah,
done. Um,
I'm so sorry about that, man.
yeah, man. I just again before I go to my therapist now, it goes to the conversation of therapists, doctors, whoever in that field of study. So many doctors want to treat symptoms, but not the causes.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I
And
hear
I
you.
remember a guest telling me that, and she was a holistic healer, and she's not really with the modern medicine and Western medicine, and I totally understand because so many doctors are just looking to make a quick buck, and it's so sad that we're here as a society, and I understand it's capitalism, it's this and that, and I get it. But anyway, when I got to my therapist now, it was after one of my really good friends passed away, and then the
Hmm.
year after that, my brother passed away.
Oh
And I
my.
told her, I said, if it wasn't for you, I don't know I would be here. I know I
Right.
put in the work. I know I took all the steps that you instructed me to better my life. But if it wasn't for you after he passed away, I would have been done because that was the hardest loss I think I've ever experienced in my life.
Wow. I'm glad you're here, Chris. Thank you.
Thank you, man. I really appreciate you.
You know, wow. Thank you for sharing all that. That's deeply touching and moving. I really, I appreciate what you're doing. I mean, trying to help men. It's hard for us to do what you've done, and it's
Yeah,
hard, it's hard to talk, especially, I mean, look at the experience you went through. I'm impressed you are still here. Thank you,
yeah.
for persevering. That was not easy.
And the worst part of my journey, well, one of the worst points in my journey was when I came back to Florida. My grandfather said to me, he's like, when you were coming back, I didn't know what to expect.
Hmm.
And I'm like, damn, man, like you guys thought that low of me? Like,
Right.
were you
Wow.
just looking forward to my funeral, or that's how
Harsh.
that felt?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, look, it's hard for people to understand, especially your grandfather's another man who's
Yeah.
been taught to, how you feel isn't
Take it on the
important.
chin, put dirt
Exactly.
in it, be a man.
Get up, keep going.
Right. Oh, you're missing an arm, it's fine. Just
Yeah, yeah.
put some rubbing alcohol on it, you're fine.
You have another one. What the hell? Yeah,
um
man, for
So let's
sure.
talk. Let's go back into the book really quick. I know you had mentioned yesterday when we spoke that you have two more that are coming out. Without saying too much, you don't have to share the details because I know they're not finished just yet. But what are the premise of both of those books?
So the next book is almost an add-on to this book. It is the 21 day guide, and it really gives you a daily exercise for 21 days that you can do every day in a row, or you can do it one a week, where it's something that you can practically apply to your life to help build the muscles to live anxiety free. The natural Homo sapien human design causes anxiety. So it's actually helping you up level yourself to live from a higher level of living. And this really works well in the developed world. In the undeveloped world, animal instincts are a lot more important. So the 21 day guide is real simple. It's going to give you an explanation of why you're doing something. And then it's going to give you a little exercise, which is thinking differently, not do pull ups.
Right.
And I don't get into nutrition. Nutrition usually works out on its own.
Yeah.
The That's the first book. It'll probably be coming out in January. I've written it 3 times now. And all 3 times are in one book. And so now it's time to kind of pull out the stuff that doesn't belong.
Right.
And my book after that is really for fathers and families. And it doesn't have to be a father, it can be women as well. And it's a guide for us as parents to have conversations over dinner. And the name of the book is Proverbs for Dinner, or Proverbs for Dinner. So it's guided action. I also have taken a lot of the wisdom from the Proverbs of the Bible. And it's a discussion guide of how to talk with our children from 5 years old and up, basically, for them to reflect on what's going on inside
Yeah.
and how to apply that to the world in a practical approach and different ways to take a lesson and then apply it to your life and build wisdom starting at age 6. I mean, let's go. It's time. I think we could have learned all this stuff starting in first grade.
Yeah. I agree.
You
You
know,
learn
forget
so much.
forget
Learn
reading
so
and
much at a
writing.
young age. Yeah.
Forget reading and writing. Let's learn how to run ourselves,
Yeah. Yeah.
Reading and writing will come along.
Right.
I'm
I
kidding.
was
I'm kidding. That's all
no, no,
important.
I know. um one of my the a guest I think I had right before you, I told her, I said, I cannot tell you anything that I learned in school outside of a psychology class that I had. Like nothing that
Nice.
I apply to my everyday life besides reading and writing, obviously. Um, and it's sad that the education system just, I feel like, doesn't invest into the kids nearly as much as they should. And
Hmm.
they don't really prepare you for the real world. I mean, it's obviously the parents' responsibility in that regard too, but you're giving money to an institution that essentially isn't really putting much into your kids besides a guided plan that they have every single year. You know, that psychology class actually gave me the tools to grieve my friend before I started therapy, and it came from a Robot Chicken episode. Um,
I'm
and
sorry.
it
Did
was
you say Robot Chicken?
Yeah, it's an Adult Swim show.
Nice.
Um,
I'm gonna.
and it
I get it on Netflix. Where do I get it?
it's on HBO Max, I believe.
All right. I'm gonna have to find it. I have not heard of that one.
And they had an episode of the 5 stages of grief.
Wow.
Yeah. And it was a giraffe stuck in quicksand. And it shows you the 5 stages of grief: acceptance, anger, just
Deal
bargaining,
making.
all the
Yeah.
other things. And then when he finally just accepts that he's gone, he reaches the bottom of the quicksand.
Ah. Oh my God.
And it's just it's a funny way to look at grief, but that stuck out to me so hard because you really underestimate how impactful learning how to grieve is before you lose somebody. And not many people know how to grieve properly. It's usually met with addiction, it's met with self-destruction. And little lessons like that really stuck out to me, and I was like 16, 17 years old, and it still sticks with me today.
And it's rampant all over that. I mean, what you just said is so powerful that people don't know how to grieve and they move into what you said, which is self-sabotage. And that self-sabotage, I mean, destroys families, destroys lives. You know, I'm gonna have to watch Robot Chicken.
Yeah. So just as like a disclosure, it's basically a show with claymation that makes fun of other TV shows. So it's not like
Oh,
anything profound or educational or anything like that. It was just
you
that
just
one episode.
we got lucky, huh? Okay, forget it. I
Yeah.
won't watch it. Maybe I'll find that episode.
Yeah.
However,
Um,
I'm a big proponent of learning the stages of grief and helping yourself and others get through it. I was recently had the privilege of treating the victims of the Surfside Tower that collapsed. A charity started up and they sent people through our program. And I've been walking people through the stages of grief for all the loved ones that were lost when that tower collapsed a couple of years ago. And I mean, it's, you know, Kubler-Ross is one of the people that really made it public. Um, really did an amazing job and really a great guide for the rest of us. So
right.
I appreciate what you said about that.
Yeah, man. So you had mentioned that charity. Do you work with any other nonprofits? I know we kind of talked about that a little bit. Do you work with any other nonprofits at all?
I am we have individual philanthropists who have been
Mhm.
donating to we have a 501(c), we have a charity called the Pathways Foundation, and the charity that is also working with us is the Phoenix Life Project.
Right.
And they are working for all victims of disasters to bring them our form of treatment, which is a very effective. More than 90% of the people have more than 55% improvements in PTSD.
Right. Um,
So yeah, that so far that's all I'm really working with. We are starting a clinical study with Larkin University, which is also a 501(c). They're a nonprofit. I don't know if that counts as a charity.
right. Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. So you had mentioned Larkin University, and I think you also said you're working with UCLA in October, right?
UCLA has agreed to do a study with us as well as Yale. And
Okay.
we're going to move through Larkin, UCLA, and Yale, and then we'll move into doing an FDA study to get FDA approval for our process. So yeah, I
So
mean,
how does getting FDA approved work? Like
oh,
how does that whole process work?
well, I mean, it's owned by the old school good old boys club,
Yeah.
and so it works with a lot of money
Hmm.
and a lot of studies. And so the FDA really wants to make sure, as many different ways as they possibly can, that what you're doing, everything you say you're doing with your product, you are doing with your product, and
Right.
that there's minimal risk. And so we have to do multiple studies that they monitor. So we have to register it with them. We have to go through it. Those studies cost $500,000 each. We have to raise the money, and we're in the
Jesus.
process. Yeah, we're in the process of doing that.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, we are raising right now, and we do accept donations in our charity for that as well.
Awesome. With those clinical studies, are any of those universities going to donate like at all towards that cause for FDA, or is it just kind of like a take as you get kind of thing?
Yeah, Larkin is.
Okay.
Yale and UCLA is have not offered to donate anything.
Right.
They do have a charitable arm that we can apply to. However, I don't know if that's going to happen.
Yeah.
So far they've said you pay us. The Yale is looking at like 250,000. I think UCLA was a little bit cheaper. Yeah, it costs money.
Yeah.
Like you said, the capitalism drives everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's tough for a guy like me. We're bootstrapping our company, and
Yeah.
fortunately our system, our process is very, very helpful for people, and the price points are 3,000 for a life-changing experience. So a lot of people are opting to come in, and 12 visits, their life is drastically different because they're in charge of their own nervous system.
Right.
We also have higher level programs, which are around 6,000, 9,000, and then I've got the business person special because you pay for results. It's guaranteed results. You pay 25,000. You have to be in Miami right now. You commit to come in for 4 to 6 months and give us a chance to get you to a very high level of psychological well-being.
Right.
And that's from an objective measure.
Hmm.
It's not according to us or the person that's coming through. It's according to their nervous system.
Right.
We've created a scoring mechanism from EEG, so we
Hmm.
know from a test how well they're doing.
Right. So do you have like therapists that work within your company? Like I'm assuming that they're doing the tests for those patients,
Yes, I have a
clients.
yeah, I've got a team of 6 people at Supermind plus fractional. I've got doctors. I've got an addictions doctor who helps people that are on meds to be able to titrate and monitor them. I also have a cardiologist and then a psychiatrist. And
Oh
so
wow.
we've got a whole team. The doctors are all fractional. They have their own practice as well as they oversee what we do and take care of our
Right.
patients.
So
And
essentially, what is I'll go small. What does a 5-year plan look like for Supermind? Like where I guess starting at FDA approved, assuming it would be the first step. Um, where do you see Supermind in 5 years, or where do you hope it to be?
so I hope that a hat like this and an app
Yeah.
will run that $3,000 program, which wipes out anxiety, depression, and PTSD. It's not going to be able to do grief. It's not going to be able to do, a lot of belief system issues. So we're going to roll this out through doctors, through practitioners. We're right now have a in-office model. It's not the wearable yet. 5 years from now, I'm going to have that wearable. I've already built
Yeah.
6 prototypes myself. My daughter is an electrical engineer that graduated from Cornell, so we
Oh,
built a
wow.
few together. Yeah, she was really helpful. And so, 5 years from now, I think we're going to be pretty much all over the U.S.
Yeah, I would absolutely love to see that.
And maybe I had a great meeting with 17 medical center group in Ukraine and a 50 medical center drill to treat PTSD. So I might be there as well.
Oh, wow.
I've
So
started.
how would that relationship work? Would they send people to you, or do you have a team go there?
So for Israel, I was willing to go there. Ukraine, I don't know.
Fair.
So
Yeah, fair.
we have a model now for all practitioners. So any mental health practitioner, and I'm actually a certified life coach, and so I do therapy myself. Well, I can't call it therapy because I'm a coach. But anyway, I do mental health coaching. I mean, the therapy I do is brainwave therapy with the coaching. So it's really psychological education with
Right,
mindfulness training and the integration of the biofeedback. So the Ukraine model, we will have two of their people come here, train them, and then they'll go back with the equipment that I have in my office, which is the EEG, and then take it to Ukraine and then treat people there. And I'll monitor the brain waves to give them the brainwave therapy guidance from here. And so I'm also going to be start automating that and being able to do that multiple sites anywhere. So
right,
we're getting ready to mail out or email practitioners all over the country to start doing cohorts to train practitioners to be able to do what we do in our office in their offices.
right.
And so yeah, we're moving a lot of directions at once, and it's very exciting. I mean,
Yeah,
I like to describe what we do like the GPS that you have on your phone as the GPS for your nervous system and your mind and how you want to live your life.
right,
Because you come into my office and you'll be able to go into any of these offices that have the equipment and get a mapping. So you know where you are, why you're where you are, what's going on in your nervous system, where your involuntary function is causing these things in your life. And then we're going to agree to where you want to go. And we have a 10 turn process for you to get there. And so it guides you. And the brain waves are how we track where you are on the map. And if you take a wrong turn, the system will automatically get you back to the next waypoint. So that each session I call a waypoint.
nice.
Yeah, so that you can get to where you want to go. And for most things, we can do that in 10 visits. Addictions usually 15 to 20, maybe 30, depending on the
The
kind.
severity, right?
Yeah, there's different drugs of choice cause different embodiments.
Yeah,
So yeah, I mean, we're also building a whole longevity platform and spiritual awakening
love
to
it,
do this too.
love it. So I usually ask every guest this towards the end of every podcast. If you can change one thing in this community, what would it be?
I'm changing each person's world
Mhm.
so that they can live from love instead of fear. And that, if I could just wave my hand, would be the first thing I would do.
Yeah, yeah.
Let's
So I
live
feel
for.
like so many of us are guided by fear.
That's right.
Yeah,
That is the human design. Our nervous system naturally looks for what's wrong to warn us what's dangerous. And even when we're safe, our system's like, you're not safe.
something doesn't feel right.
Exactly.
Everything is going too good. What is going on?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Beware.
Right. Waiting for that ghost in the house to say get out or something.
Danger, Will Robinson. Danger.
Um,
Yes.
so at the end of every podcast, I like to read a quote based on mental health or just healing or the guests that I have. But before I do that, where can all our listeners find you on socials or your website?
So my personal website is jeffreyacole.com. My corporate website is supermind.us because we're unlocking the supermind in all of us.
I love it. Do you
The
have Instagram or Facebook or anything?
so Supermind has all of that. My personal is well, it's my business personal, I don't know, my personal brand, Real G Cole, for Instagram, Geoffrey A. Cole for Facebook. I've got a great YouTube channel, Geoffrey A. Cole again. Yeah, I have Twitter, which is Real G Cole. No, actually, I believe it's Empowered G. I don't remember. And then Supermind.us again.
Awesome. If you can just send me those after we close out here, I greatly appreciate it, and I'll put it on the podcast.
Great.
So I read this to my therapist, and I wanted to read it to our listeners because this one hit me pretty hard. In my healing journey, the biggest struggle has been my parents, and the biggest struggle has been looking myself in the mirror, reminding myself that I am not them, that their trauma is not my trauma, and their struggles don't have to be my struggles. So just want to read this to you guys because I think it'll resonate with many of you. So it reads, and for some reason, I hate when there's no author on some of these quotes because some of them are so good and you want to credit them. Um, but it's from a page that I follow called Expensivity. I don't know how to really say that properly. Sorry. And it reads, "Heal. Your mom may never apologize to you because she had conditioned herself to believe that she did right by you. She hasn't healed. Heal anyway. Your father may never apologize to you because he can only see what he's done right. He hasn't healed. Your family members may never apologize to you because toxicity is what they were raised on. They haven't healed. Heal anyway. That friend may never apologize to you because he or she isn't sorry. He or she hasn't healed if and when they reach their healing. They may seek your forgiveness. Be so healed that it won't even matter. Heal for you. You owe yourself that much."
Wow. I love it.
That entire paragraph destroyed me for like an hour because I sat on it and reread it and reread it. I'm like, damn, the amount of apologies I've heard that hold no water just from my mom. And oh my God, that whole thing just completely messed me up. But Geoff, I just want to say thank you so very much for coming on today's podcast. You were a great guest, and this has been one of my favorite conversations with a fellow man, just because we need to have more of these kind of conversations. And appreciate you taking time out of your weekend to hop on.
And thank you so much for including me. And I love what you're doing. And I'm so glad I could be a part of your message. I mean, wow, really. I mean, I really appreciate you, Chris. And I agree with you. This has been a great conversation. I'd love to have more.
Thank you, man. I greatly appreciate that. And for all my listeners, as always, thank you guys so very much for supporting me. I believe I have one more opening for August to be completely filled up. If you want to record, send me an email. If you don't know my email, it is mentalhealthmovementpod@gmail.com. Until next time, guys, be well, take care of yourself, be gentle with yourself. Much love.